Language, Land, and Buffalo. Featuring Tasha Hubbard, she will be joining with a video message. We have Jolie Big Eagle and Candice P. Cardoso. And this plenary session is going to be moderated by Melody Wood.
Thank you very much for that. My name is Melody Wood. Melody Wood Mitsugasen. Waski Chosek Otinia. I used to work for SICC for 12 years. I had the privilege of working on many, many different files. So one of the most, my favorite ones will always be Mustasawasa Sesame, Buffalo Childstone, Elbow. SICC has been involved for many years in work centered around Mustasawasa Sesame. It was an ancient gathering place for First Nations people for millennia. This site and the teachings connected to it remind us that language, land, and ceremony are inseparable. As the project continued to evolve, it reflected a living commitment to restoring these relationships. Now, when we think about the buffalo, they are the cornerstone species for Indigenous people, and they carry lessons about balance, survival, and reciprocity. Across our homelands, many, including all of these panelists here, and Tasha, of course, by video, that they are working to bring back the buffalo, not only to the land, but also our stories, languages, and ways of knowing. I have prepared 4 questions here today, and normally we're going to do this panel style, but since Tasha was not able to be here due to personal commitments, she sent a video. And so what we're going to do is I'll share the 4 questions. We'll show Tasha's video, which will go through all 4 questions. Then we'll move on to Julie here, and then finally with Candice. So the 4 questions are, number 1, to begin our panel, let's position ourselves. For each of the panel members, please share how the buffalo has shaped your relationship with the land, language, and community. For number 2, in your opinion, what happens to people's worldview when a word like Tatanka or Pascuamustus and all its layers of meaning is no longer spoken? Number 3, how are ceremonies, songs, stories connected to the buffalo, and how are they intertwined with language use and transmission? And then finally, what role can youth, language learners, and language nests play in bringing back both the buffalo and in buffalo caretaking? So with that, we will have Tasha's video play, and she will answer all 4 questions.
Hello, my name is Tasha Hubbard. I'm from the Beeksis First Nation, and it ties to Thunderchild and Stony Knoll. I'm a filmmaker and the director of Singing Back the Buffalo. I'm also an associate professor at the University of Alberta. And I just want to say how honored I am to be included on this panel, but also just amongst all the amazing speakers that are here. I have to say that so many of them are my heroes. So yeah, this is really special for me. I was given some questions, and the first one is asking how the buffalo has shaped my relationship with language, land, and community. And this, I was, just give a little bit of backstory. I was adopted out as a baby, as a newborn. And when I was 14, my adopted mom asked if I wanted to find my birth family, and I did, so she helped, as did Judge Jerry Warren, who helped me find my parents. And, I spent my late teens and 20s getting to know my family, starting to learn language. But when you grow up that way and you grow up disconnected, it can be really challenging. And a lot of times it's in your own mind, some of the challenges. And so when I was in my early 30s, Maria Campbell and Joe Mitahoe and others brought me to visit a buffalo rootstone. And it was transformational for me to visit this grandfather, to sing to it, and give offerings, and think about how stones like that really oriented us as Indigenous people to the lands that we live on. And it also shaped me in the sense of understanding buffalo is more than just our food source, which is kind of what had been shared with me over in education and other sources. And so realizing that buffalo are teachers, and so it was a really fundamental shift for me. I was lucky to grow up in the south, near the grasslands, and so I was lucky to be in an adopted family that really nurtured a relationship with the land. But the buffalo has really been, really key for me in both language and community. So the next question is, what happens to a people's worldview when a word like Pasquamistus and all the layers of meaning is no longer spoken? And so, as a language learner, I think there's people that can speak much more eloquently than me on that specifically. But what I will share, and this is coming from the work that I've been doing with Buffalo and Buffalo Treaty, and learning from people who are visionaries and in the Buffalo rematriation movement, is that really starting to understand how incomplete our worldview is without the buffalo being really central to it in our thinking, in our everyday lives. How are we engaging with the buffalo and the buffalo as teacher? How are we engaging with our more than human relatives? And how are we undoing what we're taught by colonial thinking is, what I and others have used the word human supremacist. Like, how are we thinking not to always put ourselves at the top of a hierarchy and instead think of ourselves in a relationship with the other beings that we share the land with. And the destruction of the buffalo was really fundamental in dismantling our notion of ourselves as interconnected. And so, by buffalo coming back, that can be a real source of renewal in how we understand ourselves in relation to the living world. The other question is, how are ceremonies, songs, and stories connected to the buffalo, and how is that intertwined with language use and transmission? I've been a supporter of the Buffalo Treaty since 2015, and I traveled down to Fort Peck and met a really wonderful group of people, call themselves the Bate group, the female buffalo group, and they hosted a number of us, and it was such a beautiful time. While I was there, I'd already decided I wanted to make a film about the buffalo, and I was trying to figure out how to approach it, and I got asked to come and witness the sharing of buffalo songs from some of the different nations who were represented there. And so they brought leadership and elders, but they also brought their singers, and so I got to listen to them sharing buffalo songs and asking questions, and finding that moment of connectivity between them. And that was how I came up with the name of the film, because I realized when we're trying to bring buffalo back, bringing them back is one thing, and that is very, the physical element of having hooves to the ground. But singing them back incorporates the importance of our songs and our ceremonies in that relationship, and what our language and how that reawakens us. I also want to mention the story of the Mustosawasasasini. I'd always been told the story as the Mustosini, but I love both words. I think they're both important in terms of how we understand our relationship as families, how we understand the notion of adoption. And it was always so relevant for me, and as someone who's been adopted out, but also as someone who's been traditionally adopted, and just thinking about how we form our bonds with one another and how we find our roles. I just find the value in those stories is just incalculable. And the last question is, what role can youth and language learners and languageness play in bringing back the buffalo, but also in buffalo caretaking? And I've been lucky to spend time with people like Leroy Wilbear and others who work on buffalo rematriation. I've been doing so myself. over the years. And, you know, the hope in all of that is that, you know, we want our youth to be able to grow up with Buffalo close, with being able to visit, with being able to sing to them, being able to talk to them, being able to ask them for prayers, being, you know, able to see them live a life that they're meant to live as Buffalo. And that's really, you know, you can't separate that from language. You know, that's part of the journey for all of us, is reconnecting to our true selves. You know, is in our language, it is in our relationships with the more than human and with Buffalo. And then in terms of caretaking, you know, I think about that a lot. Buffalo aren't cattle, and they have their own way of being in the world, they have their own purpose. I think a lot about how this land was their land before, you know, they were here before us, and how do we try to, you know, work together. And I think that's, you know, where our Cree concepts, you know, around kinship, but also partnership, working well together, and, you know, Ichua Kanito, and, you know, how do we work well together to bring them back, to sing them back, to create the conditions in which they can live the life that they're meant to live. And you know, how do we care for them now in this time, because we are in a time of imbalance, and they took care of us for so long. You know, how are we, you know, fulfilling our responsibility to care for them now? So again, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be included. I really wish I could be there in person with everyone, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
I always enjoy listening to Tasha. She's got a very, very calming presence and calming voice. I remember when she was making Singing Back to Buffalo, we had the privilege to go out to Mustasa and Asini and visit that together. And I got to see a little bit about their film process, about how they go about just filming the entire process. And it was really, really wonderful. And just to see her work, you could see her mind going. She leads with her heart, and it was just really, really amazing. But now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to Jolie, and I'm just going to let Jolie take it away. They've got a PowerPoint presentation prepared for everyone.
Thank you. Maybe we can start the PowerPoint. Hamatakiabi. Umbas is kind of hoashte. Shante ma hoashte. Zabina Wate. Matoska Wate. I'm from Wiper First Nations. I'm Nakota, Cree, and Soto. My teachers in my life have been my uncle, my Nakshki, Ari MacArthur, and my niece, Shay MacArthur. And so I've been learning Nakota primarily in ceremony and in within my family. And I'm just going to share a little bit about myself. I'm a community of activists. I am helping to raise the Tonka consciousness, and I'm co-founder of Buffalo People Arts Institute, but I currently work at the Mackenzie Art Gallery as a TD Curatorial Fellow for Indigenous Relations. And you know, a big part of my life revolves around Buffalo, so I made the stress. I love Buffalo, Tatonga, and I've been obsessed. I think I can pinpoint the moment I became obsessed, and it was June 2010. And so today I'm gonna share a little bit, not just about Buffalo, but a little bit about myself. But I wanted just to start because I hear our elders talk about education is the new Buffalo. So I responded to that call to action when I was younger, and I took it literally to mean Western education. So I have a degree in mathematics from SIFC. I have a degree in civil engineering from the University of Calgary. And then most recently I got my master's in fine arts from the Institute of American Indian Art in Santa Fe. But a big part of my education has been from my matriarchs. especially my Ina, Doreen Passip, who's from White Bear. And I've been fortunate to have two fathers. One that helped to birth me, Vincent Big Eagle, and my other father, John Watson, from Ochapowace. So, I think about my educational background, and I give them credit for creating, who I think I am and how I think I am, and they're a big part of that. So the nonprofit that my co-founder with my husband, Lauren Kakwedaway, he's in the picture in the background. I think I blocked him out in this picture, and I share this one a lot, and I'm like, we got to get a new picture where he's beside me. And our mission has been to bring back the buffalo mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally through traditional Indigenous arts. But when we incorporated in 2015, and actually came out of a boutique, we started Tatanka Boutique in 2013. And Tatanka Boutique was about elevating Indigenous art and thinking about Tatanka, Buffalo, and Boutique together, really wanting to elevate Indigenous art. That's where the nonprofit came from, and wanting to have access to buffalo parfleche. We didn't have access to buffalo parfleche, and people were starving for this knowledge, and so our work began working with scraping buffalo hides and teaching ourselves, because I didn't grow up with this knowledge. So we started to teach ourselves and look for teachers. So our first teacher was one of our Sundance brothers from Birdtail, Doug Hanska. He was one of the first ones to teach my husband how to work on hides. And so we told people we don't know anything, but as we teach or as we learn, we'll also teach. But we didn't know about tools, we didn't know about hides or the work, we didn't know about freezing, salting, we didn't know anything. And so as we went to community, people would be like, oh, I know this. And so they would share, or they would be like, no, I don't, we've never worked on buffalo, ever. And so for some people in their 80s, they're like, this is something I saw as a child. And so, it was something we introduced to some individuals. But a lot of it, it was always there. It's just something that we kind of brought to the forefront. Because we go to the communities and they would remember, there was always somebody who did this work, and maybe it was other animals, but we're like, well, why not buffalo? I think for us, I haven't really worked on other hides. It's always been buffalo, and just now recently I started to work on some elk and some moose. But my obsession with buffalo came from that Tatanka Boutique, and then the beginning of creating this nonprofit. And what does it mean to be part of the Tatanka Oyate? That was a big part of the question I would ask myself. I was going to community. And so I also sit on International Buffalo Relations Institute with Tasha. And I also work with Candace in a couple of different places with the U of S Land Management Institute, and as well as the Buffalo Wilding Summit. And so, as part of that work, it's been, working with the Buffalo Treaty and raising Tatanka consciousness. So, when part of the question was how are we contributing, or how do we help to pass that message along to young people? So some of the work that I do as a fashion designer, as an artist, is representing Tatanka in any and every different way that I can imagine, whether it's writing stories or creating fashion or painting, as well as storytelling. And I'm just going into this next part of my life as a filmmaker. And so, with the fashion, everything I do with my fashion is either working with buffalo hides or working with something that is of a buffalo or looks like a buffalo. So like in this image, it's a red skirt, but I used the red buffalo leather dyed. It's red buffalo leather, though the skirt is kind of looks like fur to me. So I thought it looked like red dyed buffalo fur. And the image in the center is my family tree dress. And I painted this dress to look like a family tree. And at the top of my tree, maybe I don't have all of those connections yet of who my relatives are, but I know at the top of the tree is Tatonga. So I made this Tatonga buffalo dress with my buffalo headpiece. And so this obsession with buffalo is an obsession, and it's really tied to that identity piece of, who am I? Because I grew up as an Indian for a good part of my first part of my life. And as an Indian, what language do you speak? Right? Because there is no language tied to Indian, right? And so I didn't know we had a language. I grew up as an urban Indigenous person, and I thought, I was being taught in the schools that we were dead. And so I was really conflicted as who I was as an Indian person with no language. And it wasn't until, I was probably in my late teens, early 20s that I found out I'm Nakota. And then, I'm also Cree and Soto. And so this, this connection led to this connection to buffalo, to Tatonga, to Batay, right? And so, going to school, they were asking me at IAIA, why are you so obsessed with buffalo? Share more, we don't understand completely. And it's been this, when I would have these conversations with my elders, including my mom, it's like, why don't we talk about buffalo? It's too sacred, or it's too traumatic, that mourning the buffalo. And so, this past year, I ended up doing 366 days of Tatonga art. And so every day I would do something related to buffalo. And even if it's like a little piece of chicken that I found in my meal, I was like, this looks like a buffalo. I was like, can everybody see it? Because I can see it, and then, we did a hide in Banff, and I was like, I sometimes I just want to absorb the buffalo energy so much to wrap myself around that buffalo energy. I needed to hug this buffalo. And then I made a refreshing can of whoop buffalo and created this persona of Patewiya, which is buffalo woman. And so these are just a few samples of some of my artwork that I worked on for that 366 days of Tatonga, which ended up kind of overlapping because I took about 3 weeks off. And so I didn't finish in 366 days. I finished in like 380 days. And so my Instagram is Tatonka Designs, if you guys want to follow me. So, I was really challenged to really delve deep into, this obsession. And so, talking about even Tatonga, from my understanding, Tatonga is like a male buffalo, right? And a female buffalo is Patay. And so understanding this Patewiya aspect of my being, and wanting to put on the buffalo horns, and think of myself as this buffalo, starting to take these photos of myself as a Patewiya was a part of my journey. And so when I did my master's, I rethought the physical interpretation of one of our important stories, White Buffalo Calf Woman. She was one of the original people who brought the Spogin, the Chanupa, to our people. And so in that story, she turns into, from a brown, black buffalo to a red buffalo to a yellow buffalo and finally a white buffalo. And I don't know if I have those colors in order. Sometimes I get mixed up. But I envisioned the future 1,000 years, would humans still be here? And I thought, well, what would it take for the buffalo to return? Would it mean the extinguishment of the human race? And so, I proposed that to my classmates, and we had some debates because people had faith for humankind. And at that time, I really wanted more, the buffalo to survive and to thrive. So I called this exhibition Human Dystopia, Buffalo Utopia, that 1,000 years from now, the buffalo would come back in the millions. And so why they're standing on their hind leg is because they come together around the Sundance tree, which is the buffalo tree now. And they stand on their hind legs in remembrance of us, because they remember how we would dance and how we would sing, and they miss our songs. And so then I conceded with my colleagues, and I said, okay, well, I'll have hope for the human race. Maybe we're the seeds under the buffalo. And agreed that humankind can still exist in my future, buffalo future. And so, I don't know how much. So some of the other projects I'm involved in that I wanted to share today was, part of, in my discussions with matriarchs and individuals within my community and outside the community, is talking about how do we restore our culture and ceremonies. So I've been bringing together our matriarchs during winter and summer solstice, and bringing together at least 13 matriarchs to lift their chinupa, their oswagin, during that time of the year where it's an equal sun, equal night. And so from these conversations that we've had over the years, we talked about how do we continue our culture, and one of those things is the medicine wheels that we have on our land. What do those mean? Are those compasses for us right now? And can we build compasses right now for the next ones in 1,000 years? And so a project that I worked on in Regina at this park called, the old name is Regent Park, they renamed it though, bringing together the 17 grandfathers. Initially it was 16 grandfathers, kind of that 4 times 4 number, but one extra hopped on the semi. And so it ended up being 17 grandfathers and grandmothers who came, and I placed them in the shape of a buffalo, of a tatanga. And actually they were these boulders, these grandfathers were gifted through the Treaty Land Sharing Network, because if you go to a landscape store and buy a boulder, they cost like $500. So it was a gift from the Treaty Land Sharing Network and one of the ranchers. And so this kind of looks like a buffalo if you close your eye with one eye and kind of squint this way. To me, it looks like a buffalo, and I placed those boulders, those grandfathers, in the shape of a buffalo, except you can't see it with the naked eye. Maybe if you took a little ride up 100 feet, you might be able to see where the boulders are placed in creating this effigy and creating that energy field, because this is near where I live, 4 blocks north of where I live, which is called the Hood. And I live in the Hood in Regina, and I love my neighborhood. And so I want to create ceremony where I live. I said originally I'm from Chus I'm from Pile of Bones, right? And so one day I hope to move home to Matoska, but until then I'm making the neighborhood where I live in safe for me and my family. Another thing, and I don't know if this will play, but creating this Buffalo Futurism app. And around that Buffalo effigy.
I thought of this one potential reality where how would it look if the buffalo returned to this land? Buffalo Utopia. For me, that would be reconciliation. The buffalo would return to the land in full force and come back in the millions and take over what's rightfully theirs, this land.
So at the end of that video, and you can download this app, but you can only access those images if you go to that park. It's geo-located to that park, and so there's 4 stories in this app related to the buffalo. And so working on this buffalo futurism, what does it look like having buffalo in the future, and passing on this knowledge to the young people and encouraging them to do work around buffalo, to do work around Tatonga. One of the biggest projects that I'm working on, and I think I heard one of the speakers speak about changing the name of one of your streets here in Saskatoon. And I've been working on changing a street name in Regina called Dudney Avenue. And Edward Dudney was an opportunist and a landowner, and he named this street after himself. And the capital of Saskatchewan was supposed to be, I believe, North Battleford or Fort Capel, but because Edward Dudney owned land in Regina, he made the government make it the capital, and then he was able to benefit from having that land. And so he named the street after himself. And if you look at a map of Regina, it's the only street through the heart of Regina, going from east to west. There's no other street that goes east to west. It ends somewhere or begins somewhere. But so the heart of Regina is technically reflects Dudney Avenue. And Dudney was also one of the architects of residential school, and also responsible as Indian commissioner for starving some of our ancestors at Maple Creek, forcing the closure of Fort Walsh and making our people walk from Fort Walsh to Fort Capel to get their rations and their treaty money. And a lot of our ancestors died from starvation because of Dudney. So I've been working on this since November of 2016 this is the 3rd mayor that I'm on, and they won't change it. They voted last year against it. So I'm still advocating for that name change, and that's a big part of, somebody asked me, how do you do so much? I say I'm fueled by passion, but I'm also fueled by rage. And some days you see more of the rage, and some days you see more of the passion, but, mostly in the background I'm raging. And having to deal with this is going to be the 9th year. And so I said, well, if not this mayor, the next one. I keep saying that. But in the meantime, we started this campaign to change the name by having July 1st renamed as Tatonga Day. So instead of celebrating a day that has a lot of negative connotation to it, we renamed it to Tatonga Day. And so I just wanted to share a video with you of our Tatonga Day this past year. So roll that video. July 1st event since 2021, and a big part of it is painting buffalo murals on the street. So we shut down Dewdney Avenue for the day. And so we have artists come in and create a buffalo image with the contribution from community and children to paint these buffalo images. And so, however, at the end of the day, because of city policy, they have to come at the end of the day at 6 p.m. They come and wash it all off. And although we've begged them, we've pleaded with them, due to policy, they say because it's a main road, they have to wash it off. So it's only there for that one day, but a big part of what I believe in is that energy transfer, and that, you know, when we take over this city street and we reclaim, when we say we're on Treaty 4, what does that mean? Or Treaty 6, what does that mean? That means even in the city, we need to have ceremony. We need to reclaim our place. And that means, you know, doing things even if the city doesn't want us to do those things. And so, although, you know, I can't say that they totally don't support it, because they do shut down the road for us and they don't charge us for that. But, you know, it's been a long road, 9 years trying to change a street name, and although the past mayor and council voted against it, I'm visiting this new mayor and it's a new council. I've asked them to reconsider that vote and bring it forth again, because I think it's important for our community to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel confident in their community, and a big part of that is name changes. I think I just want to end on a couple of different things. So my advocacy initially was just change Dewdney Avenue. And then it was to change Dewdney to Buffalo Avenue. And now it's been changed Dewdney to Tatanka Avenue. And in May of 2023, we took it to FSIN, and they had a discussion at that level too. And they voted in favor unanimously to support that name change. And so if they train the RCMP there, people need to know that that land isn't just a land of pile of bones, it's also a land of the buffalo, land of Tatanka, land of Tatanka Avenue, and proud of where I come from and the resurgence of our language. And so that, I think, answered hopefully all four, but if it didn't, I'm going to leave Candace to answer anything that I forgot. So, pinamay.
All right, let's give Julia a round here. Thank you so much. I've known Joey since we were both in university, so it's been a long time since we've known each other, and I'm still learning wonderful things about you. I just want to go back and revisit this buffalo-shaped chicken. It just actually reminds me of Masisawasis Asani. It was the massive, massive stone the size of a small house. And when it was blown up, there were pieces that went all over, and there were actually 3 pieces that were in trust at the Western Development Museum. And when we repatriated those pieces of rock, the big rock sits at the center. And as you're driving up to that location and you see the rock, it looks like a sitting buffalo. That piece is 400 tons. So it just reminded me of that. And I absolutely love that. And though I no longer work with SICC, I still go visit that rock every year, because it's just become an important part of my life. So thank you, Julie. Now we're going to move on to Candace here, and now we'll go